adapt to surviving with underdeveloped psychic abilities is a phrase called psychic coping. I made this up. I'm not gonna lie. Is this recording? Okay. I didn't think it was. This is what we talked about last episode. Kind of scratching the surface of this idea that we have these psychic senses, soul abilities that go ignored for so long, yet they're always there. They're maturing whether we are aware of it or not. And so there comes a point when you start feeling many different things as a way to cope with the fact that something feels missing, that you don't feel like you belong, that nothing is satisfying, or that you feel out of control. And these are many ways that we feel as a result of the absence of our awareness of our psychic soul abilities. And so it's something we've been talking about and that we're going to continue to talk about in the next couple of episodes. And it's really to address that internal imbalance. It's to bring your attention to it. How have you dealt with this your whole life? Before this sort of higher consciousness, conceptual awakening. You don't have to have a spiritual awakening to understand this stuff. Now that you are second episode into this psychic coping series, I think you're at a point where once you kind of become aware of how you've dealt with it in your life, you're making a decision to stop coping and start developing. You've already done that if you've gotten this far in the podcast. So we all have soul abilities, intuition, psychic abilities, mediumship, but we must train these abilities in order to reap the benefits of having them and to gain control and perspective in our lives, just acknowledging that they're there and knowing that you have control over this stuff. Sometimes that's all it takes. We're going to dive deeper into psychic coping and really look at traits that develop due to the underdeveloped soul abilities that we have, that we actually mature, that we work on, and we just maybe aren't even aware of it. And that's this episode on NextGEN Medium, the podcast. Hey there, Sarah with you, NextGEN Medium. I found my psychic medium intuitive abilities, and it really was quite astonishing to be 33 years old and unveiling this stuff. Like, what? Where did this come from? It's like I pulled back a curtain and then there it was. But throughout my life, I always kind of felt certain ways. And I think looking back and knowing what I know now and having developed my skills to be able to do readings and be able to help people with their development, I think it's really helped me look back and see the kind of behavior I had developed because of having these soul abilities, these soul senses, and not being aware of them, or maybe being aware of the concepts, but not believing that I could be psychic or that I could possess these kinds of things. And as a society, I think that's something that a lot of us share. One of my goals is to make people aware that this is available to you. It's not certain people get to do these things. It's everybody gets to participate. It's all our birthright. It's all something that's just part of the human experience. But it doesn't feel like that, does it? I'm here to change the world. And gaining that awareness is my first goal. My second goal is to relay the kind of stuff that I've experienced, the stuff that I know is my truth, and to help you identify yourself through my journey, to show you that this isn't impossible and that you are very much capable of being in my shoes and doing psychic intuitive mediumship readings. But more importantly, to gain control. To feel like you're not alone, to feel like you have purpose, and to feel satisfied. These were 4 points that we went over in the last episode of absence of awareness, psychic coping. And so in my previous episode, those were the 4 points that I outlined as to how you feel when you're living in a world of these underdeveloped abilities. You feel like a piece of you is missing. You feel like you don't belong anywhere. You feel like you don't have a sense of control and you can't get any satisfaction. Feeling these impressions could give anybody a complex. I feel it. Makes you feel antisocial or misunderstood, against the grain of being a human being when something feels out of place. We misunderstand how to try to make sense of the situation, and traits will inevitably result that show how we cope. When we feel like something is off and we try to fix it, you might find that you end up with the same problem over and over, and that's because you're not fixing the actual problem. It's like taking medication to resolve symptoms. You're resolving symptoms, you're not resolving the actual problem, so you're going to keep having your problem. But there are ways that we change, that our personality changes, or our habits change in order to cope with feeling like something is missing, feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you don't have control, feeling like you can't be satisfied. And we're going to dive into that. But like I said, when something feels out of place, we misunderstand how to try to make sense of the situation. Traits will inevitably result that show how we cope. For years, we live our lives unaware of psychic and other soul abilities, living a life where we miss a piece of how we interact with our environment, how we process our environment, our impressions of this processing. How we've learned to cope without having this tool results in developing traits that lead us to living without harmony or peace. I myself have coped with a life of anxiety and illness, and now, after uncovering my own psychic and other soul abilities, I see how my life has changed dramatically due to connecting with my higher self and beyond. That's my furnace. That's my co-host, Fred the Furnace. He makes an appearance in just about every episode. But let me get back to the subject. But I see how my life has changed dramatically due to connecting with my higher self and beyond. It's sad for me to think how a majority of us live a life that is a life beyond fulfilling our basic needs without this incredible ability. I can see how living without knowing can be so damaging for the psyche and the body. So this list that I've come up with, 7 traits, not the end-all be-all list. This is kind of maybe a start, but I think you might be able to see yourself in at least one of these. This list, it might enlighten you. It might give you pause and give you awareness. Perhaps it could help you identify a source of your burden. It could also motivate you to consider your full abilities. Open up that world of possibilities because it will inspire you to uncover them to live a more well-rounded, fulfilling life. Traits developed make up psychological categories but can also touch on the physical body as well, which, when I tell my story, I got anxiety and I have illness a part of it. It's sort of a secondary thing that happens because of anxiety, or maybe my anxiety occurred because of my illness. Chicken and the egg. I don't know. My story, though. Once I became aware of soul abilities, my soul senses, my psychic abilities, my psychic senses, I gained a purpose that I've been looking for a long time. I've joked with myself for years. Me and myself have an inside joke. It's about a song by this band called The Who. Please tell me you know who The Who are. They're a rock band from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I think they're still going with just 2 members now. It's a song by The Who that for the longest time I've adopted as my role and my curse in this lifetime, and it's a song called The Seeker. It's a song where you're always trying to find something. You're just never done finding whatever it is that you're trying to find. And the fact of the matter is, I thought I knew what I was trying to find, but it never seemed to be found until more recently. Just always feeling like there's something missing, something of mine to master, and yet I just couldn't find it. It was a battle of constantly having my interests wax and wane, moving from one shiny object to another, only to move along still seeking, still looking, just a different thing, you know? So since my awakening, I am aware of the little things. I'm grateful for what and who is around me. I've gained perspective with how far I've come, which I wouldn't have been able to see before. That bigger picture. I was always so lost in the weeds. But most importantly, I have a stronger understanding of the workings of the universe, where I belong in all that, who I am, and who I don't have to impress. What I was looking for was knowledge, which I found through my curiosities, but not the knowledge. Now that I have the knowledge, which really isn't a lot of knowledge or anything spectacular, uncovering my purpose and understanding the simplicity of it all, I now see what I was seeking. And maybe what Pete Townsend found for himself was just a closer relationship with me, my spirit, my intuition, my psychic abilities, my mediumship abilities. The knowledge, on the other hand, is something I think about, but not something that plagues me. It's there. It's ready for me to tap into it if I want to. I don't feel like I need to. Not yet. I think I'm good. Uncovering, discovering, and developing my soul abilities has not been a cure-all, but it does accompany me when at one time I felt all alone. It also allows me to observe that bigger picture, to understand that we're all in this together, and to naturally introduce more compassion and more understanding for others, as well as less judgment on myself. Keeping this story in mind, I've got a list of traits that we exhibit when we are living our lives with an underdeveloped or unaware soul ability, concepts, understanding, underdeveloped or unaware of our soul senses, our soul abilities. So keep that stuff in mind when I'm going through the list. Also realize that traits don't make up your lifetime. You have the ability to abandon or create new traits as an act of free will. You have a choice. You have control. So here's my list of some developed traits we acquire as a result of the absence of awareness and immaturity of our soul sense and soul abilities. All right, stay with me here. This is a long list. And what's funny is that a lot of these things on the lists are me. You're welcome. So if you feel like, oh God, that's me, well, know that I was saying the same thing when I went through this list. So the first trait is reclusive. If you feel like you need to get away from people to be yourself, you're instinctually reacting to your sense to protect your spiritual and psychic energy. It's how you have coped with other people's energies since you have been unable to develop how to control what you take in. You cope by avoiding people. It's a wall of vibrations. It's easier for you to handle that when you shut it out. And in general, that's how it works. But you have to go out there eventually, which means you need to develop control of your psychic and soul senses. And it'll make you a happier person. Get out and be around people. Next up is depression. You feel depressed. This is a result of secluding yourself and developing a low self-esteem. No matter the direction or indirect causation, depression is another trait of underdeveloped soul abilities and sensing that can be curbed once awareness is triggered. Control is developed, and even when a purpose becomes apparent. Next up is anxiety. Man, I'm checking the list for all these when it comes to me. Anxiety happens when you think of going out into the world, when someone asks something of you that you truly want to be a part of, but being a part of it means you got to put your fears on the line. You got to get over those fears. Maybe it's even taken on due to someone else's anxiety. Anxiety is uncomfortable. It's draining. Understanding your soul abilities and soul senses helps you to learn what you have control of and how to protect and maintain yourself. Next up is fear of failure, which I also call a fear of success. When one is coping with underdeveloped psychic skills, there is need for perfection that heavily relies on feeding the ego. It's perfectly fine to think you're good at things and to perform at your best. But if you do things out of fear, then you are not doing things for your soul or spirit. Fear is a tool of the ego. There's something intrinsic in being in touch with your psychic soul self that allows for imperfection to be okay. It's suitable. Underdeveloped psychic coping would be the need for absolute success or absolute anti-success, because the underdeveloped and unaware would be most concerned with feeding that fear for their ego. Developing your soul skills would put self-forgiveness ahead of either fear of success or fear of failure, and serve the higher purpose that we are in need of and need to be in touch with. Okay, low self-esteem, another trait on the list. The immaturely developed soul self wants to be known and impactful. It's only natural. If it remains unknown or ignored, the true self can't emerge, and you live as an imposter. You can feel it when the dissonance resides inside of you. This confusion and lack of understanding can deeply impact your person greatly. Your self-esteem seems deeply connected to your ego in society's terms. The funny thing is we evolve from meeting our basic needs to needing to fulfill an ego, to create a sense of worthiness with our social selves. The funny part also is when we go beyond that level of fulfilling the social self, we are fulfilling our self-actualization and higher consciousness selves that negates the need for an ego. So you pass through learning how to deal with the ego and conquering the ego, and then you get to self-actualization where the ego can go F itself. So the ego that we build up with our self-esteem becomes unneeded once we hit that higher self state. Nonetheless, we still need to build up self-esteem to transcend it. And getting in touch with your soul self will help you shed light on your importance and build that self-esteem. It will also take out your harshest critic. Yourself. You're kind of hard on yourself. There's plenty of people in this world that can be hard on you. Why are you going to have yourself a part of that crew too? Another trait is moodiness. Being the intuitive being that you are means you could have the ability to pick up on energies of others wherever you go. If you walk past someone in a bad mood, you could pick up that low energy emotion and carry it with you. Then your mood turns into their mood. Also, being in such a state of mind of anxiety and depression, you can certainly just be moody from the low energies you have that you've been swimming in for who knows how long and cycling over and over. It's hard to put your energy back up when it being low is the norm. Also, you won't be able to attract those with higher energy emotions to lift you up. Those with higher energy emotions won't want to be around a person of low energy emotions, weighing them down. Having ignored and underdeveloped soul abilities and soul senses means you have undeveloped or non-existent coping abilities. Protecting your psychic and soul self is essential to combat this trait. Knowing when it happens, being able to avoid taking that in, that's important. Another trait that I put in there is addiction. And I think this is a way that we try to soothe, we try to comfort, we try to feel control, is through addiction. A large amount of these traits go along with an action of addiction. If you're feeling inadequate, if you feel lost, if you feel unsatisfied, addiction can become a way to feel or to stop feeling. It's a true coping mechanism that you feel you can control, when in actuality, you are being controlled. I theorize that those with addictions would find it easiest to get in touch with their soul selves, soul abilities, your soul senses, because I think those with addictions are the most ready to transition, seeing as though they try to do that with their addictions. They want to transition. That's why they're doing an action. They don't want to feel the way that they feel. And so they're trying to do something about it. Maybe it's not the right thing, but I think that within itself shows these are people that want to feel better, and exposing those with addictions to this higher consciousness, soul ability, soul sensing, amazing worlds. I think people with addictions might be ready to go, might be ready to experience that. Another trait that I focus on is being hyper analytical. And this is me. I'm not going to lie. Someone who knows there's something missing can feel it, but maybe not be able to identify it, could possibly turn their attention to trying to fill the gap that is missing. One way to do this is to be hyper-focused by turning your anxious energy into a quest into the weeds. This was a big one for me for a long time, especially since I take pride in my artistic skills and music production skills and all this stuff that it takes a lot of detailed work. But after my spiritual awakening, I realized there comes a point when the detail becomes an illusion that only you can see. Only you would notice that detail. And I was stuck in that world of details that only I could see. And for some reason, it was really fulfilling. But I didn't look at it in the perspective of no one else could appreciate it because nobody else would be aware that that detail even existed. That was me. That was me. So once I came to realize my psychic, intuitive, and mediumship abilities, I found my obsession with details, it fell away. And now I see things from a bigger picture than ever before. And it's pretty astounding to me, actually. Especially when I see grammar and spelling mistakes in my blog. That was never an issue before my spiritual awakening, but now it is because I'm looking at the bigger picture. Things are put into perspective. I care what people think, but it's more important the things that I say and the way that I communicate. That's what matters the most to me now. Last up is talking about a result of these traits, and that has to do with body malfunctions. Again, if you're coping, you will not be able to control or understand the sensations you're getting from the energies and people and plants and animals and whatever, beings around you. So if you hang out with sick people and do not develop your soul abilities to block off receiving the messaging from others' aches and pains, then you too will develop those sensations as well. I actually felt it the other week when I seemed to be developing similar symptoms to my coworker who had a terrible bout of the flu, and I'm just saying it could have been corona. I'm just saying. He was near the end of his sickness with a chest congestion, coughing, and it was really bad. But I was in the other office. I was in my office in the other room, and I was feeling it come on myself. When I left for the day, it disappeared, and I was so happy. But this is a part of your soul senses. They're taking in things, and they can make you think that you got something wrong. And maybe it's a result of certain kinds of energies that are around you. Okay, now what? You see all these things in yourself. You're checking the list just like I did. A few of these definitely are your MO. So you're open to opening the doors of awareness. But how do you start? It's time to sit down, close your eyes, face your inner self. It's time to meditate. So it's time to start developing your psychic coping tools. And meditation is going to be your first step to getting there. And really, it's just about focusing on nothing but what's going on in your head and in your body. It really has nothing to do with going on a guided spiritual journey. It's just taking a moment to take in what it's like to be in your brain and to feel what your body feels like living in your body. Just your state of being. That's it. So in our next podcast episode, I'm going to be exploring more about ways to develop your coping tools. Of course, meditation is going to be in there, but we got other things to talk about too. So if you feel like this list mentioned in this episode really hits home for you, then you're going to want to listen to the next episode so you can do something about it. And sometimes just having that awareness or having that possibility that, you know what, this kind of sounds like me. Sometimes it just takes that awareness and then you kind of know and kind of start working things out for yourself. But next episode, tools for the psychic coping. So that's going to do it for this episode of NextGen Medium, the podcast. Check out my website, nextgenmedium.com. Book a development session or reading. Also, check me out on social media. I got Facebook, I've got Instagram, I've got Pinterest. And when you're at my website, nextgenmedium.com, you can check out my blog. You can check out other podcast episodes as well as my vlogs. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter where I can tell you the news that's coming down the pike and special offers, including signing up for free readings. How about that? So check that out, nextgenmedium.com. That does it for this episode. Until next time, have a great rest of your day. See ya. Bye.